I murdered my relationship with 5 calculated words, and now everyone treats me like a cautionary tale. They're not wrong, but they don't understand the architecture of my betrayal. I told him I needed to explore my options. He packed before dawn. My mother screens my calls. His sister publicly called me a relationship terrorist. They think I discarded a good man from pure selfishness. The reality is more pathetic. I was terrified of ordinary happiness, so I rigged the test to make him fail. Now I'm the one drowning. Here's what I've never admitted: I engineered the entire disaster. When you finish this, you'll understand exactly why my apartment stays silent. The worst part happened 6 months before he walked out that door. I've always been the woman with a 5-year plan. At 28, I had the spreadsheet to prove it: promotion by 30, mortgage by 32, Bobby's by 35. Derek checked every box. Pediatric surgeon, volleyball player on weekends, remembered my coffee order without prompts. My friends called us #couple goals in that ironic way that wasn't ironic at all. I posted the curated version: our farmer's market Saturdays, his handmade pasta, the way he left post-it notes on my bathroom mirror. But underneath, something feral was gnawing. When Derek talked about forever, my throat closed. It wasn't cold feet, it was a full-body revolt against certainty. My college roommate was already on her 2nd kid. My Instagram feed was a parade of solitaire diamonds. Everyone else seemed so sure, and I felt like I was playing house with someone else's script. Mark entered casually. Derek's college roommate, transferred to our city for a tech job. He understood startup culture, the 80-hour weeks, the way ambition colonizes your sleep. We started with just coffee to talk about career strategy. He'd listened to me dissect office politics while Derek watched his medical dramas, checked out after 16-hour hospital shifts. The first lie was so small it barely registered. Derek asked about my Wednesday evening and I said work drinks. Technically true, Mark worked in the same complex. The distinction felt academic. I told myself I was building a professional network, not a parallel universe. That's when I downloaded the app. Not to cheat, I insisted while I created the profile, just to confirm Derek was the right choice. A control group of 1 required comparison data. I uploaded photos without my face, swiped with academic detachment. It was research. I whispered to the empty kitchen at 2 a.m., but Mark kept texting. About more than work. About philosophy podcasts and sourdough failures and the way his last relationship collapsed because she wanted him to be someone else. I responded at stoplights, in bathroom stalls, during Derek's shower. The phone became an extension of my hand, a private limb nobody else could see. Mark started the pattern. He texted about his childhood dog dying. I responded with poetry quotes. Derek asked why I was smiling at my phone. I said my coworker made a joke. The architecture of deception was being drawn in real time, each brick mortared with half-truths. I told myself it wasn't lying if I wasn't technically asked. Then came the Tuesday that shattered everything. Mark sent a text, just 3 words, "I miss you," and I felt my stomach drop with exhilaration rather than guilt. That was the moment I understood I wasn't testing my relationship. I was already inside another one. Mark's apartment became our Switzerland. Neutral territory where we dissected our lives without the messy baggage of commitment. He'd pour wine and ask what I was afraid of. I'd say settling and he'd nod like I was profound. The truth was I was addicted to being seen as profound instead of just seen. Derek planned a weekend cabin getaway for our anniversary. I told him I had a mandatory work retreat. The lie came out smooth as cream, no lumps. He believed me because why wouldn't he? I'd spent 3 years building a reputation for honesty. The foundation was cracking underneath, but the facade held. I started comparing their hands. Derek's were calloused from rock climbing. Mark's were soft, keyboard smooth. I told myself this meant something about compatibility, that I needed someone whose touch didn't remind me of obligation. That's when the app notifications started arriving at dinner. I'd silence my phone face down, but Derek noticed the pattern. "You're popular lately," he said, trying to make it light. I heard the question underneath and chose to misunderstand. The Instagram photos told one story: blessed couple goals anniversary weekend, while I was 300 miles away in Mark's bed. Derek posted a picture of the empty cabin porch with a caption about missing me. I liked it while Mark made pancakes in the background. The guilt should have stopped me. Instead, it became fuel. Every night I spent with Mark, I'd overshare with Derek the next morning. I'd buy him coffee, initiate sex, leave notes on his windshield. It was compensation, not reparation, like a thief who cleans your house after stealing your jewelry. My best friend Sarah cornered me at brunch. "You're acting like a stranger," she said. "Derek called me crying last week." I felt the floor tilt. He never cried. I'd broken something fundamental and been too wrapped in my own drama to notice. But instead of contrition, I felt irritation. How dare he make this about him? The web was so tangled I couldn't find the starting thread. Was it when Mark first texted after midnight? When I started deleting conversations? When I began timing my orgasms differently with each man, performing 2 separate versions of intimacy? I told myself I was gathering data. that this chaos had purpose, that when I finally made my choice, it would be informed, deliberate, fair. Sarah asked point-blank if there was someone else. I looked her in the eye and said, I would never. The lie tasted metallic like blood from biting my cheek. That's when I started the spreadsheet. Not for my career this time, for my relationships. Columns for emotional availability, sexual compatibility, long-term potential. I was quantifying human connection like I was reviewing quarterly reports. Derek was winning on paper, which should have meant something. Mark started pushing for more. When are you going to tell him? He'd ask, his voice thick with whiskey and entitlement. I'd deflect with logistics. His boards are next month. We have his sister's wedding. I was buying time I didn't know how to spend. The Friday night I broke, Derek had cooked my favorite meal, coq au vin, the one his grandmother taught him. He bought the expensive wine. As he poured, he said, I've been thinking about our future. I felt the walls close in. The app on my phone felt like a loaded gun. Mark's texts were a ticking sound I couldn't unhear. I excused myself to the bathroom, stared at my reflection, and didn't recognize the woman looking back. She had Derek's loyalty in one pocket and Mark's obsession in the other, and she was squeezing both to death. When I came back to the table, I opened my mouth and heard myself say, I need to explore my options. Just like that, 5 words I'd rehearsed in the shower, practiced like a presentation. I watched Derek's face go still, like a patient hearing a terminal diagnosis. He didn't cry, he didn't yell, he just set down his wine glass with robotic precision and said, okay. That's what haunts me, the quiet, the efficiency with which he dismantled our life. By the time I woke up alone the next morning, he'd taken everything that was his. The coffee maker, the router he'd bought, his grandmother's cookbook, the post-it notes from the bathroom mirror. He left his key on the counter with a note that said only, you already made your choice. I called Mark, giddy with the freedom I thought I wanted. He came over with whiskey and takeout. We celebrated my liberation by having sex on the half-empty bed, surrounded by Derek's absence like a third person watching. For 3 weeks, I lived in the wreckage. I posted thirst traps on Instagram, flaunted my newfound independence, told anyone who'd listen that I'd done the brave thing. Sarah stopped returning my calls. My mother sent a single text, I'm disappointed in the woman you've become. I screenshot it and sent it to Mark with a caption about mothers not understanding growth. The Tuesday I missed my period, I was sitting in a meeting, half listening to a presentation about Q3 projections. I felt the blood drain from my face. I counted backwards on my fingers like a teenager, heart hammering. When I got to the bathroom, the test was positive before I finished washing my hands. I stared at the 2 lines and understood the architecture of my betrayal completely. I'd stopped taking my birth control pills 2 months into my thing with Mark. Not consciously, or maybe completely consciously. The memory came back sharp, me holding the pill pack, looking at Derek across the room, thinking, if it's meant to be, it'll happen naturally. A test within a test. A way to force the universe to decide for me. The problem was, I'd been sleeping with both of them. The timeline was a tangled braid of nights and mornings and afternoons. I didn't know whose name belonged on the paternity line. That's when the real lying began. I'd built a house of cards, now I had to live in it during a hurricane. Mark was overjoyed. This is our sign, he said, already picking out cribs online. I let him believe the math worked in his favor. I told him I'd already broken up with Derek before we conceived, a lie that rewrote history by 3 weeks. I told Derek nothing. I blocked his number, convinced myself he deserved the silence after leaving so cleanly. The irony didn't register that I'd orchestrated his exit to avoid accountability, then punished him for complying. My doctor's appointment confirmed 8 weeks. I did the calculation 17 times. Derek was in the picture until week 5. Mark had been in my bed since week 2. The overlap was a Venn diagram of my deception. The anatomy scan at 12 weeks showed a healthy fetus. Mark held my hand, tears streaming down his face. I felt nothing but the cold gel on my stomach and the weight of the question I couldn't ask, what if this isn't yours? I started showing at 16 weeks. The pregnancy app said I should feel connected, but I felt like a host to my own consequences. Mark moved in, all enthusiasm and paint samples for a nursery. I let him because having him unpack his boxes meant I didn't have to unpack my lies. Sarah found out through the grapevine someone saw us at the obstetrician. She texted, is it Derek's? I replied, it's complicated. She replied, no, it's really not. Then blocked me. Another bridge turned to ash. The baby kicked for the first time during a meeting. I gasped, hands flying to my belly. My coworker asked if I was okay. I said yes, but what I meant was, I feel trapped by a life I demanded. At 20 weeks we learned the sex. A girl. Mark started calling her my princess. I looked at the ultrasound photo and saw only a Rorschach test of my failures. The anatomy scan photo showed her profile, Derek's nose, possibly, or maybe Mark's. I became obsessed with facial features, comparing anatomy textbooks to the grayscale image. I measured foreheads, studied jawlines, trying to find certainty in pixels. I started stalking Derek's social media through a fake account. He looked lighter in his photos, freer. He'd started climbing again, posting summit shots with a woman who had short hair and an easy smile. I hated her for being uncomplicated. Mark found the fake account logged in on my laptop. He didn't confront me directly, just started asking weird questions about my obsession with the past. I gaslit him, said I was researching something for work. The lies were getting clumsier, heavy with their own weight. The baby shower was a nightmare. Mark's family attended, cooing over onesies. My mother sent a gift card with no note. Sarah's absence was a hole in the room. I sat in a circle of strangers opening presents for a life I hadn't chosen, feeling the phantom presence of the man who should have been there. At 32 weeks, I woke up to cramps. Mark drove me to the hospital, white-faced. The monitor showed contractions. Braxton Hicks, the nurse said, but I saw Mark's face. He was picturing a future and I was picturing an escape hatch. The doctor asked about the father's medical history. I gave Mark's information, but my fingers hovered over Derek's name in my contacts. I had his entire medical history memorized, family heart conditions, his blood type, the medication he took for altitude sickness. I gave the nurse half the story and called it complete. That's when I realized the worst truth of all. I'd never needed to explore my options. I'd already chosen Mark, not because he was better, but because he was newer, less familiar. The options speech was theater. Derek's departure wasn't a surprise, it was the outcome I'd stage managed. I told him to leave so I wouldn't have to admit I was already gone. The baby arrived 3 weeks early on a Tuesday morning when Mark was at work. I called an Uber to the hospital, packed my bag alone. The contractions felt like karma, rhythmic, unavoidable, the body forcing accountability. She was perfect. 7 pounds 3 ounces, dark hair, blue eyes that would change color in 6 months. I held her and felt the full weight of what I'd built. Mark arrived breathless, kissed my forehead, took photos. I let him. When the birth certificate came, I stared at the father line for 40 minutes. Mark hovered, expectant. I wrote his name not because I was certain, but because he was present. It was the ultimate cowardice, letting paperwork make a decision I couldn't face. The paternity test arrived in the mail 3 weeks later. I'd ordered it secretly, used the baby's hair and Mark's toothbrush. When the results came back negative, I wasn't shocked. I'd known in that animal part of the brain where truth hides from consciousness. Mark was on paternity leave, changing diapers, singing lullabies. I watched him bond with a child that wasn't his, and felt the ground open beneath me. I still hadn't told Derek. He existed in a parallel universe where he was free, while I was shackled to a deception that gained sentient life. The Tuesday I finally broke, I saw Derek's sister's post. It was his birthday. She tagged him in a photo from the summit of a Fortiner. He looked sunburned and ecstatic. The caption read, "Can't keep this one down." It had 200 likes. I took a photo of the paternity test results. I typed Derek's number, the one I'd memorized, and deleted. I wrote, "I need to tell you something, can we meet?" He replied in 30 seconds, "Is this an emergency?" I said, "We have a daughter." The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I'm blocking this number. I sent the test anyway, along with a timestamp photo of her birth. Then I called Mark into the nursery and handed him the same piece of paper. He read it twice, his face draining from confusion to understanding to rage. "You let me believe." He started, then stopped. He looked at the baby in the crib, sleeping peacefully, and I saw the math happening in his head. 6 months, you let me love her for 6 months. I had no defense. The truth was a guillotine, and I'd placed my own head on the block months ago. Mark packed his bags that night, not with Derek's quiet efficiency, but with raw, wounded fury. He called me things I'd never been called before. Sociopath was the one that stuck. I sat in the nursery, listening to the silence of 2 men who'd left because I'd given them no choice. The baby woke up crying. I fed her, changed her, sang to her. I looked at her face and tried to see only her, not the war I'd waged to create her. My mother called the next day, not to comfort, to say, "I told you this would end badly." I didn't have the energy to point out that she'd never said any such thing. Sarah unblocked me to send a single message, "I hope you get the help you need. Don't contact me again." Derek's sister posted a vague but damning status, "Some people aren't just bad partners, they're bad humans. Karma's a patient bitch." It got 400 shares. Our mutual friends messaged me screenshots asking for my side. I had no side left to defend. The parental support group I joined kept asking about her father. I said, "He's not in the picture," and let them assume whatever they wanted. The lie had shrunk from a tumor to a scar, but it was still the only story I knew how to tell. I started therapy because I ran out of other options. The therapist asked what I wanted to talk about. I said, "I think I have commitment issues." She looked at my intake form, single mother, no father listed, 2 men who'd left in 6 months, and said, "I think you have accountability issues." She wasn't wrong. The baby is 6 months old now. Her eyes turned green, Derek's color, Mark's nose. My inability to accept a stable life. I look at her and understand that I didn't need to explore my options. I needed to explore why comfort felt like suffocation, why love felt like a trap, why I couldn't just be grateful. Derek sends child support checks through his lawyer. No note, no direct contact. Mark moved across the country for a new job. He sent one email, "I loved you both." That wasn't a lie, even if everything else was. I read it 17 times, searching for forgiveness. I'm telling this now because yesterday I saw Derek at the grocery store. He was with the short-haired woman from his photos. She was laughing at something he said, and he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. And I realized that's what I'd had. What I'd thrown away because I thought I needed a backup plan for happiness. My daughter grabbed my finger with her whole hand, and I understood the final truth: I wasn't exploring my options. I was running from them. I told Derek I needed space to find myself, but I was already lost. The exploration wasn't about discovering what I wanted. It was about avoiding the terrifying realization that I'd had it, and it still wasn't enough. So here I am, the villain in my own story, asking you to understand something I don't understand myself. I murdered my relationship with 5 words. I let another man believe he was a father. I built a life on a foundation of tests nobody else knew they were taking. The silence in my apartment is different now. It's not the absence of Derek's humming while he cooked, or Mark's keyboard clicking late at night. It's the sound of a woman who finally understands that the options she needed to explore were all internal, and she destroyed 3 lives trying to avoid looking in that mirror. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to see the architecture of a mistake so profound it has its own heartbeat. My daughter deserves better than a mother who treated love like a multiple-choice exam. I'm becoming that person, slowly, painfully, one honest day at a time. But if you see Derek, don't tell him I said that. Tell him his daughter has his laugh. Tell him I'm sorry.